It traveled through phone calls made in low voices, through glances exchanged between men who understood what silence meant. His name did not need to be raised to command obedience. It existed like a shadow stretched across streets, ports, borders. A presence felt even when he was not there. For more than a decade, he had ruled this way. Calm, unrushed, absolute. Men feared disappointing him more than they feared violence, because disappointment carried consequences that lingered. Women never rejected him. Some were drawn to the danger, mistaking proximity to power for desire. Others saw opportunity, mistaking his attention for protection or elevation. A few mistook obedience for love. They all said yes in one way or another. Yes to dinners that were really negotiations. Yes to relationships that came with rules they never questioned. Yes before he finished asking, before he even decided whether he cared. He learned early that refusal was a luxury. Few people allowed themselves around him. At first, that certainty felt intoxicating. Control always does. It simplified life. There was no guessing, no waiting, no vulnerability. People revealed themselves quickly when power stood in front of them. Desire, fear, ambition. Different faces of the same truth. He could read it all like a ledger. But over time, something began to rot beneath the surface. He would sit across from a woman in a private room overlooking the city, her hand resting lightly on his wrist, her laughter arriving half a second too soon. She would speak about him without knowing him, about the life he represented instead of the man who occupied the chair. Their intimacy followed a script so predictable it barely registered anymore. Compliments felt rehearsed. Affection felt rented. Even silence felt strategic. He never lacked company. He lacked presence. At night, when the city glowed beneath his windows like a kingdom laid out for inspection, he sometimes caught his own reflection in the glass. A man perfectly in control. A man no one ever denied. A man who could have anything and felt nothing when it was handed to him. Control without connection, he realized too late, was loneliness wearing a crown. The moment that changed everything came quietly, the way real fractures always do. Not during a confrontation, not through betrayal, but through boredom so complete it scared him more than any threat ever had. He was tired of being known before he spoke, tired of eyes that calculated instead of seeing, tired of admiration that evaporated the moment his attention moved elsewhere. He wondered, not for the first time, who he would be if no one recognized him, if his name carried no weight, if his presence did not tilt the air in a room. The thought followed him into the early morning hours, clung to him as he dressed. For once, he ignored the tailored suits hanging like armor in his closet. He reached instead for plain clothes, a worn jacket, sneakers without polish, no watch, no ring. He left his phone behind. He did not inform his men. He did not summon a driver. He stepped out alone. The city at that hour did not know him. Streets breathed slowly. Storefronts blinked awake. The world moved without pausing for his arrival, and something in his chest tightened at the unfamiliarity of it. No nods of recognition. No doors opened ahead of him. No one adjusted their tone when he passed. For the first time in years, he was unimportant. He walked until he found a small coffee shop tucked between buildings that had seen better decades. The kind of place no one would ever associate with power. The windows were fogged. The sign flickered. Inside, the air smelled like burnt espresso and fresh dough. A bell chimed as he entered, unnoticed. He stood in line with strangers whose lives carried weight he did not understand. A man in work boots. A woman clutching a paper cup like warmth itself. No one looked twice at him. No one feared him. No one wanted anything from him. The realization should have unsettled him. Instead, it felt like relief. He told himself this was nothing, just a morning, just curiosity, an experiment to confirm what he already knew, that without power, without fear, without the gravity of his name, he would be invisible. That people only said yes because they had something to gain or something to lose. He did not yet know that before the coffee cooled in his hands, someone would say no to him without knowing who he was. And that one gentle refusal would begin the slow dismantling of everything he believed made him untouchable. He did not plan to notice her. That was the truth he would later admit only to himself. The coffee shop was meant to be a place of disappearance, not discovery, a small corner of the city where his name held no weight and his presence meant nothing at all. He stood in line with his hands in his pockets, listening to the low hum of the espresso machine and the quiet shuffle of people waiting for their mornings to begin. No one moved aside for him. No one watched him carefully. The absence of attention felt strange, but also strangely clean. Then the door opened again, and the air shifted. She stepped inside without hurry, as if the world had learned to wait for her pace. Her coat was thin for the early morning chill, and her hair was loosely tied back, not styled, not intentional, just practical. She did not look around the room searching for faces or reactions. She walked straight to the counter and took her place in line with a calm that did not ask permission. There was no hesitation in her movements and no softness designed to invite help. She stood as someone who had learned long ago how to exist without being held. He felt the pull before he understood it. Not desire, not curiosity, but awareness, sharp and immediate. In his world, people reacted to him even when he did nothing. With her, it was the opposite. She did not feel him at all. He watched as the line moved forward. She did not check her phone. She did not sigh impatiently. Her hands were wrapped around each other for warmth, and her gaze rested somewhere beyond the window, as if her thoughts belonged to another place entirely. When it was her turn, she ordered something simple and waited while the cashier called out the price. For a brief moment, her fingers paused at the edge of her bag, just long enough to be noticed by someone trained to see hesitation. She counted quietly, then placed the bills on the counter without apology. No performance, no explanation, no request. Something in his chest tightened at the efficiency of it. In his world, women filled silences with laughter or questions or promises. They explained themselves even when no explanation was required. They softened truth to keep power comfortable. This woman did none of that. She accepted the exchange and stepped aside as if nothing about it mattered more than it needed to. He should have looked away then. He should have finished his order and left. But something about her stillness unsettled him. It reminded him of a rule he had once learned and then forgotten, that real strength did not announce itself. When his turn came, he did something he had not done in years. He hesitated on purpose. He searched his pockets, slowly letting the silence stretch. He felt the old instinct rise, the need to control the moment, to smooth it over, to bend the outcome. He ignored it. "I think I am short," he said quietly. The cashier sighed, already impatient. Before the cashier could speak, the woman turned. Not sharply, not with curiosity, but with attention. She looked at him fully, and for the first time that morning, he felt seen without being measured. How much, she asked. He told her the amount. She studied his face for a brief second, then shook her head gently. "I cannot today," she said. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "No embarrassment, no excuse, no apology. I hope you understand." Then she turned back to the counter and reclaimed her place in her own life. The words struck harder than any threat ever had, not because she refused him, but because she did not care what the refusal cost him. She had not feared his reaction. She had not tried to manage his pride. She had trusted him to handle the truth. As he paid and took his coffee, his hands felt unfamiliar around the cup. He watched her move to the window, sit alone, and stare out at the street as if nothing remarkable had happened. But everything had. For the first time in his life, a woman had said no to him without knowing who he was and without needing to. And somewhere beneath the surface of his control, something old and dangerous began to stir. The word no followed him long after he left the coffee shop. It stayed with him as he walked down the street and blended into the early morning crowd. It echoed beneath the noise of traffic and the low rhythm of the city waking up. It was not loud. It was not cruel. It was calm, and that was what made it dangerous. He had faced threats before. He had stared down men who believed violence could move him. None of that unsettled him the way that single quiet refusal did. He had built his life on certainty. In his world, hesitation invited weakness, and weakness invited collapse. People responded to him quickly, not because they wanted to, but because they understood the cost of delay. The rules were simple and enforced without mercy. Say yes or step aside. That was how power worked. That was how he survived. But she had stepped aside without fear. He sat at the far corner of the coffee shop long after his cup had cooled, watching the reflection of strangers move across the glass. He told himself the moment meant nothing. A woman had refused to help a stranger. That was not unusual. What unsettled him was the way she did it. She had not justified herself. She had not softened the truth. She had trusted him with it. In his world, trust was something extracted or enforced. It was never given so easily. When he finally stood and walked outside, the morning had fully arrived. Cars rushed past. A delivery truck honked impatiently. Life continued without pause. He should have returned to it. Instead, his steps slowed. He found himself glancing back at the window as if something unfinished waited there. He crossed the street and looked in. She was still inside. She sat alone by the window, holding her cup with both hands, eyes fixed on the street like someone watching for nothing at all. She did not look toward the door. She did not look for him. The realization struck deeper than he expected. She had already let the moment go. Whatever significance it held for him, it held none for her. That was when the shift happened. For the first time in years, he felt curiosity that was not strategic. He wondered who she was, not because of what she could offer, but because of what she withheld. He wondered what kind of life taught someone to say no without fear and without apology. What kind of losses shaped that steadiness? What kind of strength did not need to announce itself? He walked away before the question could turn into action. The rest of the day unraveled slowly. He sat in the back of a car he had not driven himself in years, listening to voices that waited for his approval. His phone vibrated with messages that demanded decisions. He gave them without thinking. His body knew the motions. His mind stayed somewhere else. Her face returned uninvited. Not her beauty, not her softness, but the stillness behind her eyes. The refusal that had not been meant as a challenge but had become one anyway. He realized something then that unsettled him more than any enemy ever had. She had not rejected him. She had rejected the moment. And in doing so, she had stripped him of something he relied on without knowing it. The illusion that power guaranteed access. That presence alone could tilt outcomes. That no one ever truly chose around him, they only reacted. By the time the car stopped and the door opened, he had already made a decision he refused to name. He would see her again, not to impress her, not to bend her boundaries, but to understand what it felt like to exist in a space where his power meant nothing. The thought should have angered him. Instead, it awakened something restless and alive beneath years of control. That night, as the city glowed beneath his windows, he did not feel victorious. He felt exposed. And for the first time, he understood that the most dangerous thing a person could do to him was not to fight him or obey him, but to refuse him calmly and walk away. The experiment had begun to turn on him, and he did not yet know how far it would go. He returned the next morning, before he could talk himself out of it. The decision felt reckless, which only sharpened it. Recklessness was something he had trained out of himself years ago. Yet here it was again, quiet and insistent. The street looked the same. The shop window fogged with steam. The bell chimed when he stepped inside. Nothing had changed. Except him. He told himself this was observation, not pursuit. He took a seat near the wall, where he could see the counter without being seen. He ordered the same cheap coffee and paid without hesitation. No test this time. No performance. Just presence. Minutes passed. Strangers moved in and out. He noticed things he never used to. The way people avoided each other's eyes. The way small kindnesses passed unnoticed. The way time felt longer when nothing demanded it. Then she arrived. She entered as if she belonged to the morning itself. Not early, not late. Simply on time for her own life. Her coat was buttoned wrong today. One side higher than the other. A detail so small no one else would have noticed. He did. She stood in line and reached into her bag. Her fingers searched longer than before. Her shoulders tightened, just enough to betray the effort. The cashier gave the total. She exhaled slowly. "I am sorry," she said. "I thought I had enough." The words were simple. Unarmed. Honest. The moment hovered. In his world, moments like this were opportunities. To dominate. To intervene. To claim. He stood before he decided to. He stepped forward and placed the bills on the counter. "I have it," he said, his voice steady. No weight behind it. She turned. Surprise crossed her face, then recognition. She looked at him longer this time. Not assessing. Not calculating. Looking. "It is okay," she said. "You do not have to." "I know," he replied. "But I can today." The silence that followed was different. Not awkward. Not tense. Balanced. She nodded once. "Thank you," she said. Not grateful. Not distant. Just true. They stepped aside together. Close enough to share space. Far enough to keep it clean. The drinks came. She hesitated again, then spoke. "I can pay you back later." He shook his head. "No need." She accepted that without protest. Without promise. Without debt. That told him more than any conversation could. They stood by the window. Not together. Not apart. The city moved outside, indifferent to the shift happening between them. "I am Nina," she said, offering her hand. "Caleb," he replied, taking it briefly. Firm. No linger. When she finished her coffee, she gathered her things. "I should go," she said. "Of course." She paused. "Thank you again. For today." "You are welcome. For today." She left. No backward glance. No expectation. He stayed where he was, watching the door settle, feeling something unfamiliar settle with it. He had crossed a line he could not uncross. Not into romance. Not into pursuit. Into participation. He was no longer watching to confirm a belief. He was watching himself. Outside, the city roared back into him. The car waited. The world he ruled waited. But something had shifted. A quiet imbalance. A fracture in certainty. For the first time, he understood that power meant nothing in the presence of someone who did not want it. And that understanding carried a risk no enemy ever had. Because he wanted to return. Not as the man who could take, but as the man who could wait. And he did not yet know whether that would save him or undo him completely. By the third morning, he no longer told himself it was coincidence. The lie had thinned too much to hold. He arrived at the coffee shop at the same hour, without hurry, without expectation, and without the weight of his former certainty. The street greeted him the way it greeted everyone else, indifferent and alive. She was already there. She sat by the window, coat folded beside her cup hands, wrapped around the warmth as if guarding it. She did not look up when he entered. That mattered more than if she had. He ordered his coffee and waited. Not near her. Not far away. In the middle where intention could not hide. Minutes passed. The shop filled and emptied again. The world did not pause for whatever this was becoming. When she finally noticed him, it was not sudden. Her eyes lifted, as if she had sensed the shift in air before she saw him. There was no surprise in her face. Only acknowledgement. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." They did not ask, "How are you?" They did not ask, "Why are you here?" They allowed the morning to exist between them. She finished her drink and stood. "I should go," she said. He nodded. "Of course." She gathered her bag, then hesitated. The smallest pause. Barely visible. He felt it anyway. "I wanted to say something," she said. "Yesterday, you did not make it uncomfortable." The words landed heavier than praise. "Thank you," he replied. She studied him, then spoke again. "Most people expect something when they help. An explanation. A reason. A future." He did not interrupt. "You did not," she continued. "That matters." He felt the old instinct rise. To explain. To assure. To control the narrative. He let it pass. They walked toward the door together. Not side by side. Not apart. Outside, the morning carried a different weight. Traffic louder. Air colder. She stopped near the curb. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Why are you really here?" The question was not sharp. It was careful. He understood the difference. The truth pressed against his chest too quickly. Because she had unsettled him. Because she had said no. Because she had not needed him. He did not say any of that. "I like the quiet," he said. "And I like honest people." She considered this. Not deciding. Measuring. "That makes sense," she said. She turned to leave, then paused once more. "I should be clear about something." He waited. "I do not let things become something just because they feel easy. I choose carefully." "I respect that," he said. And he did. She nodded, then walked away. He stood there longer than he needed to, watching the space she had left behind, feeling the echo of a boundary that had not been built to exclude him, only to protect her. Later that day, the silence followed him into rooms that bowed to his presence. Men waited for his decisions. Women waited for his attention. Everything felt louder than it should have. He realized then that what unsettled him was not her refusal. It was her precision. She did not resist him. She defined herself. For the first time, he wanted something that could not be taken. Something that could not be demanded. Something that had to be chosen. And the more he understood that, the more dangerous the situation became. Because he was no longer asking whether she would say yes. He was asking whether he could survive another no. He did not plan to ask her. The intention formed before the words did. They were standing near the counter, again the same place, where everything had first tilted. The air between them felt settled, but not soft like ground that could still shift without warning. She was talking about something small, the bus schedule, changing the library, closing earlier than usual. He listened the way he had learned to listen lately, without preparing a response, without looking for leverage. And then the thought rose clear and uninvited. If he did not ask now, he never would. "Would you like to have lunch with me sometime?" The words surprised him as much as they surprised her. They hung between them, heavier than he expected. Not because of risk, but because of honesty. She did not answer right away. She did not smile to soften the moment. She looked at him fully the way she always did when something mattered. The silence stretched. He felt the old reflex stirring the urge to fill the gap to adjust the outcome. He did not move. "I do not think so," she said finally. The refusal was gentle but absolute. No hesitation. No uncertainty. He nodded before his pride could react. "Okay." She watched him closely, as if checking whether the moment would turn sharp. When it did not, she spoke again. "I enjoy talking with you here," she said. "But I am careful about letting things shift into something else." He held her gaze. "I understand." She exhaled quietly, as if relieved that she did not have to defend herself. "I hope that does not disappoint you." "It does not," he said. And that was true. She gathered her things and left a moment later. The bell chimed softly behind her. The sound felt final in a way that unsettled him. He remained where he was long after she disappeared into the street. Not stunned. Not embarrassed. Aware. This no was different. It was not about circumstance. It was not about timing. It was about intention. In his world, people rarely explained their refusals. They disguised them as excuses or vanished entirely. She did neither. She trusted him to handle clarity. That trust weighed on him more than rejection ever could. The rest of the day moved around him without touching him. Meetings ended without memory. Voices blurred into noise. His body performed the rituals of command, while his mind stayed elsewhere. He realized something that night alone in the quiet of his apartment. He did not want her attention. He wanted her decision. There was a difference. Attention could be taken. Decisions could not. For the first time, the power he carried felt irrelevant, even dangerous, because it tempted him to do the one thing that would ruin everything. To push. So he did the opposite. The next morning, he did not go to the coffee shop. He did not look for her on the street. He did not arrange coincidence. The absence felt like withdrawal. Uncomfortable. Necessary. 2 days passed. Then 3. When he returned, he did so without expectation. She was there seated by the window. She looked up and saw him. No surprise. No warmth. Just recognition. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." They spoke of nothing again. But something had changed. She watched him differently. Not cautiously. Curiously. When she stood to leave, she paused. "I hope I did not offend you the other day," she said. "You did not," he replied immediately. She searched his face. Satisfied. "I value honesty," she said. "Even when it costs something." "So do I," he said. And for the first time in his life, that statement carried weight. As she walked away, he understood the truth he had been avoiding. This was no longer about whether she would say yes. It was about whether he could accept her no, without turning it into a challenge. And he was not yet sure he was strong enough to do that. He told himself he would stop coming. Not because she asked. She never did. But because something in him had begun to bend, and he was not sure what would break if it bent any further. Days passed without the coffee shop, without the window seat, without the quiet weight of her presence. He filled the time with work and meetings and decisions that once made him feel solid. Now they only reminded him how loud power could be when it tried to replace meaning. He noticed the change before anyone else did. He interrupted less. He watched more. He let silences exist. Men around him mistook it for strategy. They did not know he was practicing restraint. When he finally returned, it was not with a plan. It was with acceptance. If she was there, he would greet her. If she was not, he would leave. No correction. No pursuit. She was there, seated by the window as always. Light resting on her face. The city moving beyond her without touching her. She looked up when he approached, and something passed between them that had not been there before. Recognition without tension. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning." They spoke of nothing. The weather. The street repairs. A bookstore closing down the block. Small things that carried no obligation. What mattered was what did not happen. He did not lean in. He did not steer. He did not ask for more. She noticed. When she stood to leave, she paused. "You did not disappear," she said. He met her eyes. "I did not want to punish honesty." Her expression softened not into trust, but into consideration. That mattered more. They walked out together, not touching, not distant. Just aligned. At the corner, she stopped. "Most people leave when I say no," she said. Or they stay only to prove something. He waited. "You did neither." "I am trying to learn who I am without winning," he said. The truth surprised them both. She studied him for a long moment. Then nodded. "That is rare," she said. The word stayed with him long after she turned away. Rare. Not powerful. Not dangerous. Not impressive. Rare. That night, he sat alone without distraction. No calls. No screens. Just awareness. He realized he was no longer measuring time by her presence. He was measuring himself by his behavior. He wanted to return to the coffee shop. Not to see her, but to prove something to himself. That he could show up without asking. That he could stay without claiming. That he could leave without resenting. The next week confirmed it. They crossed paths more often now. At the library steps. Near the crosswalk. Outside the small grocery store. Each time a little easier. each time a little more honest. One evening, she stopped him before they parted. "I need to say something." He nodded. "I am careful," she said, "because I have learned that attention can feel like safety until it becomes control." He did not interrupt. "I do not know what you want from me, but I know what I will not give." He felt the weight of that boundary, not as a wall, as a line drawn in clarity. "I will not ask for anything you are not ready to choose," she continued. He met her gaze. "I accept that." The words were simple, but they cost him more than anything he had ever given. She looked at him, then really looked, as if seeing not who he was, but who he was becoming. As she walked away, he understood the danger clearly now. She was not resisting him. She was reshaping him. And for the first time, he was not sure whether that terrified him, or whether it was the most alive he had felt in years. The night was not meant to exist in her world. That was what he believed. That was the lie he lived inside. He told himself she would never cross into the places where his name carried weight. The rooms where men lowered their voices, where silence was respect, where fear wore tailored suits. The invitation had not been his choice. It was a necessary appearance, a gathering wrapped in legitimacy, a front that demanded his presence. He arrived late, as he always did. The room shifted the moment he entered. Conversations softened. Eyes followed. Men straightened. Women paused. Power settled where he stood. He felt it return like armor, sliding back into place. Heavy, familiar, dangerous. Then he saw her. She stood near the entrance coat, folded over her arm, confusion written across her face. She did not belong here. Every instinct in him screamed that something had gone wrong. She had come with a friend, someone who insisted, someone who did not understand the cost. Their eyes met. Time fractured. She did not see the man from the coffee shop. She did not see the man who waited. She saw the one others feared. Men approached him, spoke his name with reverence, deference, warning. She watched it happen, the truth assembling itself piece by piece. Her face did not harden. That would have been easier. It closed. The moment he took a step toward her, she turned. Not running. Not angry. Calm. The way she always was when something mattered. He followed, ignoring voices calling him back, ignoring hands that reached for his attention. He caught up to her just outside the doors where the city swallowed sound. She stopped but did not face him. How long, she asked. He did not pretend. From the beginning. She turned then, her eyes steady. Hurt sharpened into clarity. "So every conversation," she said. "Every moment. That was you watching me." "No," he said. "Not anymore." But it was at first, she replied. "You decided who I was before I had a choice." The words struck deeper than accusation. They were truth. "I told you I needed honesty," she said. "Even when it was uncomfortable." "I know," he replied. "And I failed." She looked past him at the lights, at the building, at the life he had hidden behind silence. "I never said no because I wanted to be chaste," she said. "I said no because I meant it." Her voice did not rise. That hurt more than anger. You understood it only when it became interesting. He had no defense. No explanation that did not sound like control. "I am sorry," he said. She nodded once. The same motion she had given him that first morning. "I need time," she said. "And space." Then she left. He did not follow. For the first time in his life, he understood the cost of power. Not the enemies it created, but the trust it destroyed. The room behind him waited. The city waited. His world waited. But he stood alone in the noise, knowing the truth had finally found him. And it had taken the only thing he could not replace. The silence that followed her absence was unlike anything he had known. It was not empty. It was heavy. Days passed without coincidence. Without the coffee shop. Without the familiar rhythm of her footsteps crossing his path. The city continued, as it always had, but something essential had been removed from it. In his world, silence usually meant control. It meant negotiations happening elsewhere. It meant fear doing its work without instruction. This silence was different. It did not obey him. He did not reach out. That was the first true act of restraint he had ever chosen. No calls. No messages. No intermediaries sent to soften what had been broken. Men around him noticed the chain. They mistook it for strategy. They assumed something dangerous was coming. They did not understand that this time the danger lived inside him. He returned to the coffee shop alone. Not to wait for her. Not to create memory. But to stand where the truth had first been spoken. He ordered the same drink and placed an envelope on the counter. For whoever needs it next, he said. No name. No recognition. He walked away before the gesture could become performance. At night, he sat in rooms built for power and felt none of it. The walls held victories that no longer mattered. The silence pressed in reminding him of the cost of deception. He understood now that the damage had not come from who he was, but from who he had chosen not to be. She had not taken his power from him. She had shown him where it failed. Days turned into weeks. He learned how to wait without expecting reward. How to accept consequence without negotiation. How to sit with the truth without reshaping it. For the first time, he bent without breaking. And that bending humbled him more than any threat ever could. Then one afternoon, as the light softened across the street, he heard his name spoken without fear. Without reverence. He turned. She stood there holding a folded letter. His words worn at the edges, from being opened more than once. I read it, she said. Thank you, he replied. They stood with space between them. Not distance. Not closeness. Honesty. You did not ask me for anything, she said. I could not, he answered. That matters, she said. The words were not forgiveness. But they were permission. I am not ready to pretend this did not hurt, she said. I would never ask you to, he replied. She nodded slowly. Then we can talk. Not return. Not repair. Talk. As she turned away, he did not follow. He did not need to. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to kneel. Not physically. Not publicly. But internally. To lower himself without expectation. To surrender control without losing dignity. The most feared man in the city had finally learned the weight of humility. And it had changed him in a way no empire ever had. They did not return to the beginning. They moved forward. The city did not notice the shift, but he did. Everything felt slower, now not because time had changed, but because he no longer rushed to control it. When they met again, it was not by accident and not by design. It was chosen. They walked the same streets that had once carried silence between them. Now those silences felt earned. Not protective. Not defensive. Honest. She did not pretend the hurt had faded. She did not soften her caution to make him comfortable. That was the rule now. Nothing unearned. Nothing hidden. He did not offer promises. He offered consistency. He showed up when he said he would. He stepped back when she asked. He spoke when the truth mattered, even when it cost him. Weeks passed. Coffee turned into long walks. Walks turned into shared meals, planned, not improvised. He never insisted on paying. She never pretended not to notice. They met as equals in a world that had never offered him that before. One evening, they stood near the crosswalk where so many conversations had ended without resolution. The traffic slowed. The light changed. She stopped walking. I need to know something, she said. He waited. If I had never seen that world. If I had never known who you really were, would you have told me? The question did not accuse. It measured. He looked at the street, at the lights, at the ordinary lives moving past them. Yes, he said. Not to keep you, but to be known. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. That is the only reason I would accept. The truth settled between them without ceremony, without fear. Months later, they passed the coffee shop where everything had begun. She slowed, smiled. You never did tell me why you were short that first morning. He smiled back. Because I wanted to know who you would be when I had nothing to offer. She took his hand. And now she asked. Now I know who I want to be when I have everything, he replied. She stopped, turned toward him, and kissed him once. Not urgently, not carefully. Certainly. The city continued. The world he once ruled continued. But something had ended, and something else had begun. The most powerful man she would ever meet had learned the only